they're doing. So their interaction with their parents, or what are the, like when they are playing with toys or with their parents. So that is kind of like the direct child assessment. In direct child assessment, there is for example, there is a method that is called Bailey scales of infant development. So in this method, we are going to observe the child based on some activities like playing with the parents or playing with the toys or interacting with the parents. And then we are gonna measure the development like motor and mental development and behavioral development of the child. On the other hand, we are it is a kind of indirect, not indirect measurement. It is kind of like a report from the parents or caregivers. So in this method, the parents are observing their child in a daily basis. So based on their observations, we can measure the developmental outcomes of that child. So in this method, we can we're going to ask some questions related to the developmental domains, and then based on their report or based on their answers, we can understand the development of a child. Such as there is a method that is called Early Childhood Development Index. So in this method, we ask the mothers or the caregivers some questions related to 4 developmental domains, such as literacy, numeracy, socio-emotional domain or physical domain. Then based on their answers, we can get this Early Childhood Development Index. And I'm going to talk about this Early Childhood Development Index in later of my presentation when I'll be talking about the multi-indicator cluster survey. So I have been talking about the domains, developmental domains of early childhood development. So how many domains we have to understand the overall development of a child? So in total, there are 8 domains to understand the development of a child. And these are cognitive skills. So the cognitive skills are like the memory of the child or their ability to solve a problem or the analytical skills of the child. And then the language skills. So the language skills is to understand and the ability of a child to understand and express the verbal communication with their parents or with others. And the motor skills is the gross movements such as jumping and throwing, and fine movements such as the ability of a child to use their fingers. And the executive function, as I mentioned, the executive function is like how do they intentionally control over behavior and cognition. And this can be inhibitory control or cognitive flexibility or the attention and working memory. And the temperament is the biological influences on the experience and expression of emotion. So the temperament can be positive effect or activity level or risk taking of a child, or the negative affectivity like the fear, anger, sadness, or discomfort, and the attention shifting and focusing and inhibitory and activational control. And the socio-emotional skills, that is how the child is the child's ability to regulate the emotional responses and how they are interacting socially. And then the personal or social adaptive skills, that is the ability of a child to perform their daily activities such as self-feeding and dressing. And pre and early academic skills, that is the ability of a child to learn reading and math, such as counting numbers and naming letters or alphabets. And approaches to learning is how the children are engaged in learning experiences, such as their ability to stay focused or interested or engaged with the activities. So the domains, which domains we are gonna use, that depends on the purpose of the assessment. So what are the purpose of the assessment that will determine which domains of ECD we can use in our study. So there are 4 purposes of the assessment of early childhood development. These are population monitoring, program evaluation, hypothesis-driven or exploratory research, and screening children for further evaluation and diagnosis. So for the population monitoring, so if we want to understand the overall development of that population, then we can use like a global indicator, such as in the mix or multiple indicator cluster survey, we used the early childhood development index to understand the overall situation of that population in that context or in that country. And in the program evaluation, for example, if in a project, if we are concerned to understand the impact of an early parent stimulation program on child development, and the objective of our study is to understand whether children 6 to 24 months of age receiving the interventions perform better on developmental tests compared to the children who are not receiving that intervention. And the hypothesis-driven or exploratory research is kind of if we want to develop and test new mechanisms or new models or theories of child development, then what should we use in our study? And the last one is the screening children for further evaluation and diagnosis. So in this purpose, we can like screen a child using a screening tool and then refer the children who is screened positive for risk of developmental delay. So the next couple of slides, I will be going to talk about the life course effects of different risk factors. And So I'm going to talk about the life course effects of different risk factors in my next couple of slides, such as like the exposures to risk factors during pregnancy can affect the newborn health and development, and which can subsequently affect the early and middle childhood. So the risk factors are like social, economic, and political risk factors, which can be like employment of the parents or the housing issues or the political commitment such as parental leave or support for childcare or child protection that can affect the enabling environment for the caregiver and family, such as like the adequate nutrition during the pregnancy or the primary health care of the mother or the safe delivery and the mental health of the mother. And this enabling environment or these enabling factors and the socio-economic and political factors that can affect the environmental factors positively or negatively. And these environmental factors, that positive environmental factors include many elements of nurturing care. So that might be the education, such as access to daycare or primary school readiness, or health, such as like improved water and sanitation or disease prevention, and the responsive caregiving, such as parenting support and home visits, or having the learning materials such as books or toys, or the stimulating environment, and the nutrition such as dietary diversity and breastfeeding or micronutrient and macronutrient supplementation. All these factors can lead to the optimal nutrition and responsive caregiving, which can then help to get the optimal childhood development, such as better cognitive and motor development and better academic performance and the improved work capacity and productivity of an individual. So this is the whole framework of the whole conceptual framework that I have been showing in my previous slide in a simplified version. So now I'm going to talk about the risk factors. What are the risk factors of early childhood development that can contribute to the adverse developmental outcomes? So there are two types of risk factors. These are biological risk factors and the psychosocial risk factors. So the biological risk factors are nutrition-related risk factors such as intrauterine growth restriction, child malnutrition, iodine deficiency, iron deficiency, and the non-nutrition-related biological factors such as infectious diseases and environmental exposures. Such as these biological risk factors, such as child malnutrition, can influence the development by affecting a child's behavior. For example, causing the child to fuss more or play less, or by directly altering brain development and function. So we can say like this biological risk factors can directly or indirectly affect the child's development. On the other hand, the infectious disease can also affect the child's development both in direct and indirect pathways, such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, or diarrhea due to poor water sanitation and hygiene. All these factors contribute to poor developmental outcomes. And environmental exposures, such as exposures to the contaminated drinking water or exposures to heavy metals such as lead, arsenic, or manganese, or exposures to prenatal pesticide, that these factors can also lead to poor developmental outcomes. And now I'm going to talk about the psychosocial risk factors. So the psychosocial risk factors can be parenting factors such as cognitive stimulation or child learning opportunities, and caregiver sensitivity and responsitivity. And when the children are not in stimulating and responsive environments, it is very unlikely that they will demonstrate the same competencies as children who are in stimulating and positive environments. And there is another psychosocial factors, that is contextual risk factors, and these are maternal depression and exposure to violence. So suppose in the maternal depression, the mental health of the mother or caregiver isn't very good, and that's why it can affect the home learning environment or the responsive caregiving of the child, and that can lead to the poor developmental outcomes. On the other hand, exposure to violence, that is kind of if the child are exposed to violence like different conflicts such as war, then that can also affect the child's developmental outcomes. So in total, there are like 8 risk factors that can lead to poor developmental outcomes. So this figure is showing the relationship between risk factors in early childhood development in Guatemalan children and the achievement scores in adolescence. So the horizontal axis, that is showing the number of risk factors that I talked in my previous slides, and this vertical axis is showing the standardized score for numeracy. So the numeracy is kind of like mathematical skills and general knowledge scores derived from a standardized achievement test, and the RPM, that is child score on a non-verbal test of intelligence, and the achievement can be measured by child's summed score on a standardized test of reading comprehension and vocabulary. And the last one is knowledge, that can be measured by also with a standardized score. So if we will look at this figure, we can see like if the child are exposed to high number of risk factors, then they are less likely to get a higher standardized score on knowledge or achievement or numeracy or the non-verbal test of intelligence in their adolescence. So we can say like exposure to a high number of risk factors during early childhood that can predict the lower achievement scores in adolescence. So in this part of my presentation, I'm going to talk about the interventions, like what is the best period to implement the interventions and what are the interventions that can help to get a better developmental outcomes. So in this figure, you can see the vertical axis is showing the brain function or behavioral competencies, and the horizontal factors that is showing the different life stage of an individual. So the green line here, it is showing the green line. You can see here it shows the healthy trajectory of brain and behavioral development from prenatal period through the adulthood. And the red line shows the developmental trajectory that below the child potential. And the blue color line that shows the potential changes in trajectories following an intervention. And the risk factors and the protective factors that may influence the trajectories both before and after the interventions. So the thing is that if we observe the observed intervention effects can be decreased over time, and many childhood interventions has shown that this observed effect, this pattern of diminishing intervention effects in follow-up studies, and these diminishing intervention effects can happen or may happen due to the influence of environmental effects of children's developmental outcomes. And the thing is that which factors, like if the child are exposed to the protective factors, like after the intervention, then the intervention effects are gonna sustain. Or if the child are exposed to risk factors, so I didn't mention about the protective factors. So the protective factors are the child adequate nutrition and optimum health provision or responsive caregiving. So if the child are getting these protective factors or exposed to these protective factors, that then the intervention effects can be sustained. Or if the child is exposed to the risk factors such that I mentioned in my previous slides, that can diminish or decrease the intervention effects. And the other thing I haven't mentioned here, like the early childhood development. So you can see in this gray bar. So this is the period where we can implement our intervention, and this is the early childhood. That is the period the intervention can work better. So now I'm going to talk about the early. Now I'm going to talk about the interventions like life stage or so what would be the interventions in different life stages and how they are gonna impact on the early childhood or early childhood development. So most of the interventions during the period from preconception to birth focus on the physical and mental health of the mother to support a healthy pregnancy and improved birth outcomes. And these interventions the interventions that are focusing on nurturing care and protection are usually So the interventions focusing on nurturing care and protection are usually introduced at birth. However, maternal programming for nurturing care begins during pregnancy, and even for nurturing care, even earlier with the caregiver's own childhood experiences. So these evidence-based interventions So these evidence-based interventions during infancy that combine basic sectoral elements in health, nutrition, child and social protection, and childcare and learning with nurturing care and protection can synergistically improve child developmental outcomes. So for example, if we are including like stimulation in nutrition programs, that can improve the developmental outcomes, which cannot be fully promoted through nutrition intervention alone. And the thing is that, so we can say that early childhood is the most effective and cost-efficient period to ensure all children develop to their full potential. So based on my previous slides, this figure is, or this framework is showing the promotion of young children's development through a multi-sectoral approach. So the multi-sectoral approach is like, we are talking about the nurturing care. So the domains of nurturing care couldn't alone like get a better developmental outcomes of a child. So we should think about like adding or including the other sectors to get a better developmental outcomes, such as like the educational status. We can say the educational status of the woman, like that can help to get like better learning of young children or child. That can also like have impact on child daycare or preschool and formal education. And so we can say that like that sectoral initiative, like if we want to get better outcomes, then we should combine the nurturing care with the other sectoral initiatives to get a greater impact on children's developmental outcomes. And this strategy, that multi-sectoral approach, that can promote the family-centered interventions rather than those focused solely on the child. Like the family-centered intervention, that means like we can engage both parents, like fathers and mothers or other family members, to get a better child developmental outcomes. So we conducted a randomized control trial in Tanzania, and in this study, we tested the effects of engaging fathers as well as mothers, and also the bundling and parenting, bundling the parenting and nutrition interventions to find out, to understand, to get the better outcomes, developmental outcomes and nutritional outcomes of a child. And we found that bundling parenting and nutrition program can improve the multiple child outcomes, such as the dietary diversity of the child, or it has also significant effects on the developmental domains, such as cognitive development of the child. This is the theory of change of our study. So you can say like here, the yellow colored box, that are the interventions that we have implemented in our studies, and how these interventions are working in different pathways to address different risk factors and to get a better nutritional status and childhood development of the child. And the thing is that here, like if we are engaging the father in responsive caregiving, and that can help to achieve the better early childhood development as well as the better child nutritional status. And based on this theory of change, we have implemented some priority behaviors to both of the parents, like both fathers and mothers. And these behaviors are like responsive and sensitive to child's needs, and the discipline child in positive ways, or like the two-way interaction with the child, such as like responsive play with the child and giving the child the learning materials such as toys or child's books and engaging the child in engaged with the child frequently, like positive verbal and non-verbal communication with the child. So this is the last part of my presentation, and in this part I am going to discuss about the multiple indicator cluster survey, and using the data from this multiple indicator cluster survey, I'll show some preliminary outcomes on early childhood development in Lao PDR. And firstly, what is multiple indicator cluster survey, and what are the purposes of multiple indicator cluster survey? So the multiple indicator cluster survey is a household survey, and it is developed by UNICEF. And the purpose of this survey is to fill the data gaps to monitor the human development indicators, particularly in children and women. And this is an integral part of policies and plans for many governments around the world. And this survey is conducted in almost 118 countries, and Lao PDR is one of them. So now I'm going to talk about the situation of early childhood development in Lao PDR. So in our study, we used the data from Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey 2017, or it is also called MIX-5. And our study population were around 5,000 children aged 36 to 59 months. And we try to find out the determinants of early childhood development in Laos. And we measured the early childhood development using the global indicators that is called Early Childhood Development Index, as I mentioned earlier slides in my presentation. So now I'm going to talk about like how we get that early childhood development index. So there are 4 developmental domains that are four developmental domains that used in early childhood development index. These are literacy, numeracy, physical, socio-emotional, and learning. So the literacy, numeracy, so in this domain, so as I mentioned in my earlier slide that this is the method that we are going to ask some questions to parents or the caregivers, and based on their reports, we develop that index, or we develop that methods. And the thing is that here, like in the literacy numeracy domain, suppose we asked some questions, we asked 3 questions to the caretakers or to the mothers, and the questions are: if the child can name or identify at least 10 letters of the alphabet, or the child can read at least 4 simple popular words, or the child can know the name and recognize the symbol for all numbers from 1 to 10. So if the child can do 2 activities out of these 3 activities, then we can say the child are developmentally on track for literacy and numeracy. And the next domain is the physical domain. So like the literacy numeracy, we also asked some question related to physical growth, something like that. So the questions are kind of if the child can pick up a small object within 2 fingers or not, or if the child are too sick to play. So if the parents are reporting that the child if the mothers or caregivers report that the child are doing 1 activities out of these 2 activities, or positive 1 activities out of these 2 activities, then the child are in the developmental track for these physical domains, as well as like the socio-emotional and the learning domains are kind of like same as literacy and numeracy, but the questions are different. For the socio-emotional domain, like the child gets along well with the other children or not. Sorry, excuse me. Or if the child can if the child did bite or kick or hit other children, or if the child doesn't get distracted. So if when we are trying to get the child development index, so if the child are developmentally on track of the 3 domains out of these 4 domains, then we can say the child is developmentally on track. So this is how we can get the early childhood development index. So now I'm going to talk about the home learning environment. As I mentioned in my previous slides about the home learning environment and responsive caregiving. So what is the home learning environment? So the home learning environment is kind of like the interaction or quality interactions between parent and child, or the child stimulating activities such as reading books for the child or telling stories to the child or singing songs for the child, taking child outside or playing with the child, and naming or counting objects. And it also includes the availability of learning materials such as children's books and toys. So this is the home learning environment. And now I'm gonna talk about the pathways that I assumed for my study. So the possible pathways for early childhood development in Lao PDR is so our outcome is early childhood development, and we assumed that there are several factors that can contribute directly or indirectly to the developmental outcomes. So the factors are child factors, such as the nutritional status of the child or anemia status of the child and the child morbidities that can directly affect the early childhood development, or they can indirectly affect the early childhood education that can lead to developmental outcomes. And also the child morbidities that can affect anemia status of the child and nutritional status of the child. And the second one is the maternal factors. So the maternal factors are the anemia status of the mother or caregiver and their attitudes towards the gender roles. And these 2 factors, maternal factors, can affect the home learning environment, and then the home learning environment can lead to the early childhood development. And the paternal factors, so here the paternal factors is the father's engagement and also the attitudes of the father towards the gender roles. So the father's engagement is not very common in many contexts, or due to cultural variation, father's engagement in home learning environment isn't very common. So if the fathers are engaged in home learning environment, so how they are affecting the early childhood development. And the other factors are like, as I mentioned, water, sanitation, and hygiene, or the home environment that can also affect the child morbidities, and that can lead to the early childhood development. So in our study, we hypothesized that the father's engagement in home learning environment that can improve the child development. And here's some data in this table. This is the demographics or child characteristics of the of our study. So we can see here like about 39% of the children are stunted, and 37% of the children are anemic in a subset of population. And if we looking at the supportive home learning materials, only 15% of the children had 1 or more children's book, and 36% had at least 1 type of toy, and only 6% of the children have supportive home learning materials. That is like at least 1 child book and 1 type of toy. This table is showing the parents' engagement in the home learning environment. So as I mentioned, the home learning environment, all child stimulating activities, including like reading books or telling stories, something like that. So compared to fathers, you can see here that compared to mothers, the fathers are less likely to engaged with their child in these stimulation activities, and only the 47% only the 47% of the fathers were engaged in at least one activity, and 1/10 of the fathers who are engaged with their child in 4 or more activities. Though the engagement of the mothers with their child wasn't also high in low period. So this figure is showing the percentage of children who are on the developmental track for each domain, such as literacy, numeracy, physical, and socio-emotional and learning, and the overall index of early childhood development. So the horizontal axis that is showing the percentage of children on developmental track, and these are the domains, and the the vertical axis showing the individual domain and the overall index. So except the literacy, numeracy, most of the children are on the developmental track for learning, socio-emotional, and physical domain. Only 25% of the children are on the developmental track for literacy and numeracy in low period. This figure is showing the parents' involvement in stimulation activities, and this horizontal axis is showing the percentage of children developmentally on track in literacy and numeracy, and the vertical axis is showing the number of activities that parents are engaged with their child. And the orange color bar is it shows the number of activities that mother engaged with their child, and the yellow color bar is showing the yellow color bar represents the number of activities that fathers engaged with their child. So we can see here, like, the children are less likely in the developmental track for literacy and numeracy if their parents are not engaged with any activities, compared to the children whose parents are engaged with like 6 activities. So that is kind of like, if the parents are not engaged, then if the parents are not engaged in any activities, they are less likely to developmentally track for literacy and numeracy. And the figure is showing the supportive home learning materials, like the synergistic effects of supporting home learning materials and the father's engagement in child stimulation activities, how it affects the early childhood development. Such as the literacy and numeracy. So the yellow, in this figure, we can see the yellow color bar that is showing the lacking supportive materials or father's engagement, and the brown color bar that is showing that represents the have supporting materials and father's engagement, and the vertical axis that is showing the percentage of children on track for the early childhood development, or they are the percentage of children who are on the developmental track. So we can see, like, if the parents, like, if the child's father is engaged with the child stimulation activities and also having the supportive learning materials like toys or child's books, they are more likely to on the developmentally track for literacy and numeracy, compared to the children who hadn't supporting materials or whose fathers were not engaged with the stimulation activities. So we can say, like, there is a synergistic effects of having supportive the supportive materials and the father's engagement on early childhood development of a child. So this figure, or this Venn diagram, this is showing the intersection of anemia, or this is showing the different nutritional deficiencies such as anemia and stunting, and the early childhood development in a subset of children, in Lao period. So you can see like here the like 11% of the children who are not developmentally on track, like 11% of the children are not developmentally on track, and among of these 11% of children, 8% of the children either have anemia, or maybe they are stunted, or they have both nutritional deficiencies, anemia or stunted. So we can say like most of the children who are not developmentally on track also have stunting or anemia. So the thing is that like if the child are not developmentally on track, they might have also different type of nutritional deficiencies. So if we are gonna like implement some interventions that shouldn't only focus on the developmental domains, that also should be focused on the nutritional or other nutritional status or anemia status or other nutritional deficiencies of the child. So now I'm going to wrap up my presentation with some key messages. So we can say the early childhood development period, that is very crucial for shaping a child's growth and development, and the home learning environment and father's engagement in responsive caregiving that play an important role in children's development. So we should focus on the interventions that target the common risk factors for poor child nutrition and early development. And the policies should be prioritized, creating an enabling environment for the parents and resources for parents that can help the families to provide the nurturing care for young children. Thank you so much. And I'm now open for questions. Please feel free to ask any questions.
Khop chai Susmita มีไผมีคำถามยังบ่ No any question มีคำถามยังเนาะเข้าใจหมดบ่ถ้าว่าบ่มีคำถามยังก็มีแต่ขอบใจSusmitaเนาะที่ว่าให้ข้อมูลที่มีประโยชน์มีไผ
สมพรอาจารย์
Okay, Sumpon want to ask. Yes, please, Sumpon.
Happy New Year. Thank you for nice presentation. I saw this presentation is very useful for children because I do some research with my professor. They have like a normal weight, feel normal weight, but they have inside, they have like an iron deficiency and the mother too have anemia. The one research before 2020. Yeah. And nowadays we saw like the children like preschool children, they use the phone and they quite speak like maybe some children under 5 maybe cannot speak out, but they can understand. Maybe this we can discuss or and have the research more on that. But I would like to know too, like what happened the brain they do. But I saw your presentation is very nice. It's have many factors determinants if you can explain a little bit, we can solve this for the late to speak out how we can.
Sorry, what is your question? I'm sorry, I missed your question. What is the question again? Can you please ask the question again?
Not the real questions, but
Okay.
for the discussion.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your comments. Thank you so much.
อันคำถามส้มก่อนละบอกว่าถ้าว่าเด็กน้อยเว้าซานี่นะมันมีวิธีการในการเฮ็ดจังได๋ให้เด็กน้อยมันเว้าได้ตามเกณฑ์อายุหั่นน่ะใช่น้ำ
ก็ดีถ้าว่าเราซอยน้องก็อยากพูด
Okay, so the thing is that here it is like language skills of the child. So we have like mentioned the interaction, like interaction. When I was talking about the home learning environment, that was like quality interaction with the child. Like the parents, if the parents can like interact with the child, like and talk with the child and doing the activities like try to make them understand about or try to help them to count the number or name some words, that I think that interaction with the parents with the child can help them to get better speed of the language skills or something like that. Does that make any sense? Yeah.
ก็ชื่อประเด็นเนาะสมพรเนาะก็แสดงว่าเราต้องมีปฏิกิริยากับเด็กน้อยมันขึ้นกับเราว่าสมมุติเราบ่มักเว้านำเด็กน้อยมันก็สิบ่ปากเพราะฉะนั้นเราพยายามว่าได้มีการสื่อสารนำเด็กน้อยนะโอเคเจ้าขอบใจมีท่านอื่นอีกบ่ที่ว่าอยากถามหยังหรือว่าอยากแชร์อันใดอันหนึ่งแต่ว่าส่วนหลายแล้วผู้เข้าร่วมนี่ก็อยากให้แปลตัว PowerPoint เป็นภาษาลาวเนาะ
Okay. Mày dắt tham nha qua mày. Lưới. Chào chào.
That's right. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is, how old are the children that you can do screening and to see their health is normal or abnormal, and then we can do the.
Mày xiên bô chen tận đây nè.
The chen à? The my. Yes, my question is how old of the children that you can do the screening to know that they are normal or abnormal for next diagnostic for them.
Okay.
How old that you can do the screening?
So I think she asked, yeah, screening. So I'm not sure like what is the like proper age for screening, but as I mentioned, like this the screening should be like whatever we have measured like between 0 to 5 years. So the screening should be like 0 to 5 years of age, I believe.
Vô มีไผถามอีกแล้วเนาะมีบ่ คันบ่มีไผแล้วเขาก็มีแต่ว่าขอขอบใจอันสุมิตาหลายๆเนาะที่ว่าให้ข้อมูลที่มีประโยชน์แก่พวกเราที่สุดแล้วก็หวังว่าสิ่งที่ว่าเพิ่นนำเสนอมานี่จะเป็นบทเรียนของแก่พวกเราเนาะเพื่อว่าจะนำไปใช้ในอนาคตถ้าบ่มีหยังแล้วก็มีแต่ว่าขอบใจเนาะ Happy New Year มีไผยักเว้าเนี่ยว่าคือบ่ได้มี
อยากให้เปิดกล้องได้บ่เปิดกล้อง
เพิ่นอยากให้เปิดกล้องทุกคนเพิ่นอยากถ่ายรูปถ้าเป็นไปได้ โอเคเพื่อว่าสิถ่ายรูปไปเป็นที่ระลึกเนาะถ้าว่าพวกน้องอยากได้อันน่ะ PowerPoint เนี่ยก็เข้าอยู่ในลิงก์นั่นแหละเนาะขอบใจเด้อที่เข้าร่วมนำเอาได้แล้วบ่เอ้ย1 2 3โอเคโอเคเนาะขอบใจหลายๆเด้อ Happy New Year
Happy New Year ค่ะ
Happy New Year เด้ออาจารย์
โอเคบ๊ายบาย
เอ้ยเดี๋ยวนี้เน็ตจ้าซ่า
Thank you so much. Yeah. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everyone. Yeah.
อุ้มเขาอยู่บักโดน
ว่าฟังเบิ่งข้างล่างก็ฟังเบิ่งย้อนหลังก็ได้เพราะว่าเพิ่นอันเสพไปอยู่นั่นคัน